Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here. We're so excited to be presenting or working with low-level ESOL students with little to no first language literacy. The presenters, fantastic Stephen Reed here with Literacy for All. A reminder that this program was made possible through the support of the Florida Department of Education, Division of Career and Adult Education. And I'll pass it over to Stephen to go ahead and get started with this fantastic webinar. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me today. This is a topic that I know a lot of people are interested in. A little bit about me and the program I work for. I am with Literacy Volunteers Charlottesville, Albemarle in Charlottesville, Virginia. We are a community-based literacy organization that we work with immigrants and refugees. About 95% of our students are immigrants and refugees. We also have a state regional program that's in our town. They tend to work with folks at a little bit higher level, those who are kind of in that area where they're ready to transition into a pre-GED or a GED program, those who are working at a little higher level. We tend to work with those who are kind of at the lower levels, those who come to us with little to no literacy in that first language. And we kind of became an organization who specializes in this area, partly by accident. It was not necessarily our plan, but because we were getting so many people into this area of Central Virginia that needed these services, it became a skill set that we all developed because of need. And I'm betting that many of you, your programs have had similar paths to where you are now based on the need of your community. And so that's how we got to this path of working with the people who have the absolute lowest level of literacy. And I'm happy to be here today to share what we have learned over the last several years.
Amazing. I'll hop in super quick. I meant to mention this before, and thank you so much for everyone already sharing in the chat. If you do have any questions, we ask that you please wait until the end. But if there's something that pops in your mind and you'd rather write it down, go ahead and drop it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer it. Thanks so much.
Please do. There will be plenty of time at the end for me to answer all your questions. So don't hesitate to put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to start by looking at kind of understanding the pre-literate learner, how they got to where they are, and then how they got to us. And then strategies with working with individuals at that pre-literate level, and then some activities to use in your lessons. I know for me, when I go to a workshop, I want to walk away with things that I can use in my lesson tomorrow. And so I always try to have the last chunk of my session devoted to some activities that we have put to use, and I hope that you'll be able to put them to use as well. So let's start looking at those pre-literate learners. If you look at the worldwide data, about 14% of the world's population is functionally or completely illiterate. That really means that there are over 1 billion people in the world who cannot read and write well. And that just feels like a massive, massive number. But in many parts of the world, literacy rates are extremely low. In a country like Afghanistan, only about 38% of adults over 15 are literate in their first language. And so they have one of the lowest literacy rates in the world. But yeah, they only have about 38% who can read and write. And if you look at this map is from 2015, so it's a little bit old. But the lighter the color, the country, the lower their literacy rates. And looking at this map, what percentage of your students are inside that rectangle or from countries inside that rectangle? I know for us, The vast majority are from inside that rectangle. That's how we ended up working with so many people who have those lower literacy rates. So as you think about what someone's literacy rate is when they come to us, it really is, you can divide them into about 6 different categories. We start with the pre-literate people, those who have no literacy in their first language, because their first language either doesn't have a written form or that written form is developing. There are about 6,800 languages in the world. 11, the top 11 of those languages are spoken by 51% of the people in the entire world population. The top from language 12 down through 200 is another 44%. And so that's 96% of the world's population speak one of those, speak about 5% of the total languages in the world. So 95% speak about 5% of the world's languages. There are still approximately 4,000 languages that either do not have a written form or are in the process of developing one. Most of these languages are going to be tribal languages or like community languages that are spoken by a relatively small number of people. Particularly, these are going to come through in sub-Saharan Africa and in parts of Southern Asia. That seems to be where most of the pre-literate languages are. Then we also have the non-literate, those who have no access to literacy education due to war or famine or economic reasons. This is probably the number one group that I see in our center. This one and the next category, the non-literate, so they've never had any instruction, but have you know, their language does have a written form. They just don't have access to it. And then we have the semi-literate, those who have had very limited literacy instruction, less than 2 or 3 years. Again, it's a lot of those same reasons of war or you know, economic situations. So those two are probably our chief categories that we see. Then we get the people who come to us who are literate, but not in an alphabetic language. So they may be using the logographies, such as Chinese, or a syllabary like we see with Cherokee, or Japanese Kana, Korean. And so they have a very different writing system that is not at all like what we are mostly comfortable with. You then have those who are literate in a non-Latin alphabet. So something that is either an alphabet or an alphabet adjacent, like the abugidas that you see in a lot of South Asian languages, where you have a symbol and an add-on somewhere onto that symbol that represents the vowel. So the symbol itself is the consonant, and then an addition somewhere onto the letter to make it, to get the full syllable. And then you have the non Latin alphabets like Greek or Cyrillic, something like that. So it's a full alphabet. It works the same way that the Latin alphabet does. It just uses different symbols. And then we get those who are fully literate in their first language, and it is a Latin-based alphabet. And so they have really a lot extra going for them that many of the other students don't have, because they already know what all the letters do. Some of them may not have the same sounds we do. If you think about Y's and J's in Spanish, for example, how those two are swapped, or V's and W's in German, those letters are swapped. And so they're basically the same, but there are some slight differences. So these are those 6 categories. And today we're going to be just focusing on those first 3, the pre-literate, the non-literate, and the semi-literate. So what would, in today's society, what would make someone fall into one of these categories? The chief explanation tends to be political and cultural situations. Wars, genocides, famine, forced migrations, those all relate to, they can all lead to a situation where someone does not have access to education. Poverty is probably one of the leading causes of low literacy in the world. Even looking at the statistics in the United States, 18% of people in the US have low literacy. But according to the National Institute for Literacy, 70% of welfare recipients in the US have low literacy. 82% of children who qualify for free or reduced lunches are reading below grade level by 4th grade. So there is a direct link, even here in the US, to poverty and literacy. So, if we look at how that relates to other countries, it falls directly in line. There is a big connection between poverty and literacy worldwide. Then you also have cultural issues. For example, many cultures, women are not allowed to go to school. For example, in South Sudan, 75% of girls never even start primary school. In Afghanistan, with the return of the Taliban, women and girls are not allowed to go to school. In Ethiopia, about 40% of girls are married by the time they're 18. In Burkina Faso, only about 1% of girls complete secondary school. And then you also have ethnic oppression of certain groups that either limit or prohibit their education. The Uyghurs of China, Kurds in Iran and other countries, Roma populations throughout Europe are all either forbidden or discouraged from getting an education. So I want to look at those strategies of how to get started. That always seems to be the biggest issue that I hear. What do I do first? I have somebody who's sitting across the table from me who doesn't speak a word of English and has no literacy in their first language. So I can't even use Google Translate to type in my message and have them read it because they don't understand it in their language either. What do I do? Where do I start? So that's what I want to spend a little time looking at today. Is where do you start? How do you get started? And I think it's important for us to think about phonemic awareness because whether you're working with somebody who is coming to us from a new language or who has English as a first language but doesn't read at all, that phonemic awareness is the place you have to start. And that's the ability to hear a word and understand that it's made up of individual sounds, which are called phonemes. This is an auditory skill. It is not phonics. It's not a written skill. This is that auditory skill to start processing the things that I'm hearing coming in and how those translate into symbols that can be read on a page. And understanding that first step is how the sound comes in and recognizing that those sounds, that word is made up of individual sounds. And those sounds are called phonemes. Those are the smallest unit of a sound. The word dog has 3 phonemes, d, a, g. Throughout this, I will use the American Heritage Dictionary System for my symbols. A lot of people will use the International Phonetic Alphabet, but I find that most, yeah, unless you are a linguist, a lot of those symbols don't really make sense. And so most people are much more familiar with the system using the American Heritage Dictionary. And that's why you'll see the O with a little housetop as my symbol instead of the symbol that goes in the IPA. I also will always put phonemes between slashes. So if you see something between slashes in this, that's what that's about. There are 48 phonemes in the English language, but that number is problematic. If you ask 100 linguists how many phonemes are there, they're going to tell you probably 48. But they may not have the same 48 on their list as the next one does. I've seen as many as 50, 52, 56 even, and then down as few as 40. But 48 seems to be the number everyone likes, but they don't always line up with the same 40. They can't agree on that part. They can agree on the number, but they can't agree on what they are. From phonemes, then we're going to move to graphemes. Those are the smallest units of writing, letters. Like the word dog has 3 graphemes, D-O-G, and I always put those in quotation marks. From there, once we have that understanding of this word is made up of individual sounds, then we have to be thinking about how do we transition those sounds from what we're hearing and turn that into a letter, or then we see a letter and we turn that into a sound, and how we bounce back and forth between letter and sound, and understanding that these two things are equal. And this is called phonological recoding, where we translate that sound into the letter and the letter into the sound, and moving to be able to bounce back and forth. But there's a problem. As we all know, there are 26 letters in the English alphabet, right? And I've already said that there are 48 sounds. So we're already running into a bit of a problem. But it gets much, much worse. There are about 250 letter combinations that can make up those 48 sounds. And that's where things get very, very tricky for someone just coming into our language, because it feels like there's so many things happening all at once, and our language is not straightforward. Let's look at the sound ja, for example. Ja. What makes ja? That's easy, right? It's a J, like jog, ja, jog. No problem, right? Then we also have a G, as in giant. And then we have a DGE, as in bridge. And then we have a GE, as in cage. And then we have a D, as in gradual. And that's 5 letter combinations that we can use to create the sound ja. And there are other sound combinations that are even worse. And so, like I said, about 250 letter combinations to make up those 48 sounds. So we have set a fairly big challenge for our students to learn to speak English and learn to read and write in English. So thinking more about that print awareness, that's kind of the understanding that this sentence means something, that English uses the Latin alphabet. We can all look at that set of symbols and put that together and understand that each of those symbols has a sound. When you put those symbols together, they create a word, and those words you put together and they make a sentence, and that is a coherent sentence that we can all understand. But for somebody who doesn't understand the Latin alphabet or understand any alphabet at all, this collection of symbols means just as much as that other collection of symbols. They have no basis for understanding which ones mean something and which ones don't. And so that's a big challenge that you'll have to work on with your students, is making them understand these are symbols that we do understand and use, and these are symbols that mean nothing or may have a specific meaning in other contexts. But when strung together, they don't mean anything at all. It is also important to be able to recognize what that role and function of print is. We then have to take that to the point of, is my student comfortable holding a pen or a pencil? If you have students who come to you who have no literacy in their first language, have never been to school, they may not know how to hold a pencil properly. And so that is a skill that you need to work with them on so that they really fully understand how to hold a pencil properly. This is a fine motor skill that we have been developing. I've been developing it for 50 years, and my handwriting's still terrible. But I type really fast, so it balances. But it's a skill that we teach little kids as they're developing all their other fine motor skills, how to write. Whenever you start teaching an adult to do the same thing, that process is going to be slower because it's a fine motor skill that they don't have. And it will take a little bit more effort to get a student kind of up to speed on how to properly manipulate a pen or a pencil. It is also important that we get them to a point where they can recognize the letters and numbers in the Latin alphabet. Even those who have a little bit of literacy in another language may come to us from a different writing system, and so they may not know our letters at all. The largest population of students that we have are from Afghanistan. So their first language is either Dari or Pashto, and both of those will use the Arabic alphabet or the Arabic abjad for their writing system. And so what they're used to seeing is very different from what we're used to seeing, except the numbers. The numbers are the same. But the letters are very, very different. And I'll actually give you an example of those in a few slides. We have to be able to recognize, get to a point where they can recognize high frequency sight words. This is something that we will get to with a student as they're kind of getting through that basic level and are starting to get into level 1. So this is a level that can take, in some cases, a couple of years to get through that pre-level 1 section before they can even start in our level 1 textbook. And so having, I think it's important for our teachers and tutors to understand that this process does take time. I have said that if a student comes to me in their 50s or 60s, has no literacy in their first language, and does not speak a word of English, I would expect them to be in basic level for 3 years. 4 would be fine. If they can do it in under 3 years, it is extremely impressive. So I think having that realism attached to your teaching is important, that we really understand that this process for adults who are working at this level takes time. It's not the same as when we were kids learning a new language, because when we were kids, our brains just soak up language very, very quickly. Older brains, it just takes a little more time. Also, when you were a kid, you were going to school for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 180 days a year. Our students are working with us 2, 3, 6 hours a week, maybe. If we're lucky, we get them more than 6 hours a week. And then they have full-time jobs and lives and families on top of that. And so it's just not realistic for us to expect students coming to us at this level to make super fast progress. So that's something that I want us to really kind of be thinking about throughout all of this. Is this takes time. 3 years at basic level before they get to level 1 is perfectly acceptable if they come to us, my age or so, and no literacy in their first language. That would be expected. I think it's also important for teachers to really be thinking about direct instruction in things like the direction the language goes. For students who come to us who are Arabic, Dari, Pashto, or Urdu speakers, the language, the writing moves right to left as opposed to left to right with the Latin alphabet. If they come to us from traditional Chinese, Japanese, Korean, or Vietnamese, it was written vertically. Most of those languages have switched to a horizontal writing system now, but the traditional versions of those languages were all written vertically. I think it's also important for us to help our students as they're learning to write, understand where the words fit on the line. If you have worked with somebody from Afghanistan, you have seen this situation where they will write their letters right in the middle of the line. The line is the midpoint, and that's what they're working from. And the reason for that is that's how Arabic does work. The line is the marker for the center of the letter. And so they have letters that go above and letters that go below, but the line is the center mark. And as opposed to in the Latin alphabet, where the line is the bottom mark. We have a few descenders, but for the most part, the line is the bottom mark. And so that's something that you'll need to talk with your students about. Let's pull that letter up because that's the way it's done in using the Latin alphabet. This next slide, I often get pushback on, but I'm going to tell you it's a hill I'm going to die on. Do not dive into the alphabet. Just don't do it. Do not start with A and go to Z and let that be the way you are teaching day 1 of your lessons. I cannot stress this enough. It is a terrible, terrible idea. Imagine if you walk into a class and you don't speak the language and you're not really comfortable writing in your own language. And I give you that. And like, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to learn all of these symbols. Oh yeah. Also, this is what the symbol looks like if it's at the beginning of the word. It looks different if it's in the middle of the word, and it looks different still if it's at the end of the word. So we're going to take these symbols, and I'm going to teach you 3 different versions of them, and that's what we're going to do in class today. How many of you would have the first instinct is like, I need to get out of this room. This is overwhelming. I don't know that I can do this. And that's exactly what our students could be feeling like. How about this? Would this be easier if this were day 1 of our lesson? This is the Abugida Burmese. And keep in mind that each of these is the consonant, and the vowel will attach itself somewhere to that consonant, depending on what sound you're wanting to make. So we'll have all of those additions to do as we're going. Again, not a problem at all, right? Yeah, super simple. So is that better? How about that? There's a lot of symbols going on right there. Some of them are the same, just bigger or smaller. Some of them are roughly the same, and you can kind of see it. Some of them are quite different. And so that's a lot to expect for somebody who doesn't have any sort of print awareness. So that's a lot. You're going to overwhelm your students if you try to jump in with A and go to Z. If I gave you this, how many letters do we see there? Put it in the chat. How many letters you see? Or somebody unmute, tell me how many letters you see. No idea. 6, 7, 5, 4, 3, 3, 4, 42, 4, 7. So it's tough to know, isn't it? But the word we're looking at here is bisht, which means 20 in Dari. And there are 4 letters here. And those letters are, I can get this. So that is Bay. And this is Yay. And this is She. And that is Tay. And you'll notice the direction that that came up. Because this is Dari in the Arabic Abjad, it moves right to left. And so those are the individual letters. There are 4 in this word to make the word bisht, like I said, which means 20. And so that is what we are doing to our students when we are trying to teach them all the letters at one time. It can look very, very confusing. And when you were looking at this, you were probably seeing a wavy line and some dots. Didn't really look like letters, it's a wavy line and some dots, right? So what do we have here? We have a circle and a line, right? It's just a circle and a line. But it's a P, or maybe it's a B, or a D, or we put a little tail on it and it's G, and we move that little tail and it's a Q. And we understand that that is that series of letters because we recognize them. But to somebody who is just learning to write, it's a circle and a line. You move the line around and sometimes it has a tail and sometimes it doesn't, but it's a circle and a line. And is that much different than the wavy line and some dots that we were looking at in Dari? For us, yes, because that's the one we read. For a Dari speaker, the other one makes way more sense than this one. It's just something we have to keep in mind when we are teaching this. Somebody unmute for me.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Julie. What letter is this?
Don't see a letter. Oh, F.
How about this one?
And F.
And how about this one?
F.
And that one?
F.
What about this one?
F.
And this one?
F.
How about that one?
F.
And what about this one?
F.
Huh.
Yeah.
So if you were brand new to the language, do you think you'd be able to recognize all 8 of those as the same letter?
Absolutely not.
So that's another thing we have to think about when we're working with our students. Thank you, Julie. That's something we have to think about when we're working with our students is what do the individual letters look like and how do they vary from print and cursive and various fonts. Think about the letter A. There are 2 very common ways that we see A in fonts, but they're not normally written that way as you are writing. And so that can be very confusing for our students as well. So we have to pay attention to, what the letter looks like. And so another reason that I think that diving headfirst into the alphabet is a terrible decision. So what I recommend is start with letters that matter. So the letters in the student's name, the letter in their spouses or their children's names, their addresses. So for me, it would be me and my cats. Those would be a good place to start. Charlie's up top and Alistair is on the platform below. And so having those letters, being able to write those letters are a good place to start if someone were trying to teach me, because those are letters and names that mean something to me already. And so by going with things that already matter, that way, then I can make a stronger connection to them. Then once the student is comfortable with all the letters or with many of the letters, you can start piecing the entire alphabet together and filling in those spaces of the letters that they may not have come across. And so you can build the alphabet together, but as you're getting started, just don't overwhelm them with too many symbols at one time. Okay. So the next step, or actually usually kind of the first step for me, is building vocabulary. We need to get our students to have some vocabulary to get started with. I find the easiest place to get started are concrete nouns. Those are going to be objects that you can pick up and touch and see and feel, and you will have an understanding of what those things are. The brain is very good at mapping a word to an object. And so that's why concrete nouns are so much easier to learn than any other part of speech, because our brain can make that connection of this is a tree, those are books. We know what a tree is. We know what books are. Even if we don't know those words in the new language, we know the object and we can map the new word to the object that we already know. That makes it, in many regards, the easiest vocabulary to learn, those concrete nouns. Abstract nouns are a little bit harder. Those usually come later. You'll find those sneaking in kind of halfway through what I call level 1 in our textbook series. If you're used to NRS, that's students who are in, excuse me, who are in kind of the higher end of level 2. That's where you'll start seeing those abstract nouns start coming in. Action verbs usually are fairly quick, but they will take a little bit longer than concrete nouns. The mind has to map a word to an action, and the action can be a bit trickier to make that map if the action is very short. Stative verbs are much more difficult. Verbs like, need, want, be, have, where it's not actually doing something, it's a state of being. And so those are a little bit harder to map. If the language has those, the translation can help, but it takes a little bit more time than it does with an action verb. Adjectives take a little bit longer again. In this case, we have to map a word to a characteristic of an object. And so it takes a little bit longer to get the word fast connected to that hare, or slow connected to that tortoise, or the colors connected to an object, or the object connected to a color. And so that takes a little bit longer. But again, when you're starting out, you're going to want the first vocabulary you will be teaching are concrete nouns, action verbs, and easily identifiable adjectives. that's the best place to start, because those three are the categories that are easiest to map out in your brain. The important thing when working vocabulary is repetition. Repetition, 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 repetition. Research shows that a new word must be heard and produced a minimum of 12 times for it to become part of long-term memory. And I don't mean where we give them a new word and they say it out loud 12 times and it's theirs forever. It's more like 12 encounters with a word than 12, 12 times saying it. So one of the things I always do is I pre-teach my vocabulary at the beginning of the lesson. And then when we get into the lesson and they run into the word again, they are already familiar with it because we've already learned it. And so within a lesson, when we learn it at the beginning is an encounter. When they hit it again in the body of the lesson, it's a second encounter. And then when we do some review and practice activities at the end, we're looking at a third or fourth, maybe fifth encounter with those words. And so we have multiple encounters within one lesson. And then what I recommend is for the students to go home after lesson that day and right before they go to bed, practice all the vocabulary from that night, from that day's lesson, practicing it that night right before they go to bed. And so that will give them another exposure and a little bit of time between the first exposure and the second. And then again, the next day or the day after, and then a couple of days after that. And so they practice it a few times within the week, so that by the time they come back around to the beginning of the next week, they'll have had the times you've done it in class, and then 2 or 3 times outside of class if they've hit it again. And so that is something that will lock it in place a lot better, is having those multiple encounters over a relatively short period of time. Now, this is meaning that it's to a point where they can produce it. Recognition takes a little bit less. And so if they only hit it 6 to 8 times, they would likely recognize it when they see it again, but not be able to use it, just have it come to them as they're trying to speak or write. And that word is just part of the vocabulary that they can easily use. So recognition takes less time than being able to actually produce it and use it. Now, there are some highly literate adults and children who can do it in as few as 5 repetitions. In general, kids' brains just work faster, particularly with language. I always say that you can take a kid who doesn't speak a word of English, you take them out, put them on the playground, pick them up in a couple of hours, and they're fluent. Their brains just pick up language so much faster, and they're just fearless when it comes to, okay, I'll give it a try. I need to find a way to communicate with these other kids my age because they're playing a game I want to play, and the only way that's going to happen is if we communicate with each other. And so they'll dive in and figure out a way to communicate. Adults are not quite that brave, and so it takes adults a lot longer. And also our brains are just wired differently. Their brains are in the process of still creating those pathways. Ours are already kind of locked in, and it takes a little bit more effort. If you want more information on that, look into the science of reading. And it's a really great way to understand how a preliterate brain creates the pathways necessary to read. Highly recommend the science of reading. When I'm working with lower level individuals, pictures are a mainstay of my lessons. We have the ability to create a mutual exclusivity within our pathways within our brain. You can look at these three objects, and even if, even if you've never learned the word before, and I tell you that that is a chair, those three objects are quite different. But the thing that they have in common is their chairness. And so you'll be able, even somebody who has no literacy, and you look at those three objects and you hear the word chair, and you will make those pathways that get to chair, regardless of what your background is, because you know that those three objects are, they have the same function. They are the same, just a little bit different models of the same idea. When you're working in action verbs and then some other parts of speech as well, actions are going to help you. You are going to get very, very good at charades if you are working at this level, and using any sort of gesture or action you can to reinforce the word is going to help you. I have a friend who specializes in this level, and back where I used to work, I was walking past her classroom one day, and I looked through her window, and she was standing in her trash can, and I'm like, okay, I need more information. So I slid back and was just kind of standing there watching her, and she stepped out of her trash can and said, outside. And then back in, inside, outside, inside. And she had the class chanting along with her, and they were laughing hysterically at their teacher standing in her trash can. But I will guarantee you, to this day, everyone in the room remembers her standing in her trash can and will remember the words inside and outside. The more ridiculous you can make it, the more likely it is to stick in your head. And so her stepping in and out of her trash can, and then the next part of the lesson was on and off, and she crawled up on her desk and then off her desk and on her desk and off her desk. I'm sure the students in there thought she was insane, but they also all remember that lesson and remember the vocabulary, which is really the most important part. Definitely feel free to use the actions to kind of help reinforce what it is you're trying to teach. The use of videos or animation can also be very, very helpful. When I was a kid learning prepositions, I learned that a preposition is anything a dot can do to a box. It can be beside the box, it can be above the box, it can be in the box, it can be below the box. A lot of people tell me they learned anything a cat can do to a chair, but getting a cat to actually behave enough to follow directions is a little much to be asking in your class. So animations with a dot in a box are probably a better choice. So something like that can be very, very useful. Prepositions in general are very difficult to teach because they do not translate well. Even within various forms of English, we do not use them the same. If you look at British English versus American English, in American English, we do something on the weekend, and in the UK, they will do it at the weekend. And so even within English, there is not consistency. And ask yourself, do you fill out a form or do you fill in a form? And the answer to that question would tell me likely where you grew up in the United States, because different parts of the country choose different prepositions, and that's within American English. And so prepositions jumping from one language to another are translations are pretty useless. They can kind of get you into the general idea, but they will not be exactly right. So let's think about some activities that you can use when you are working with your student. What I like to teach first, like day one of my lessons, there are certain phrases that I will teach right at the very beginning, partly because I need the students to know these words, and partly because I want to give them ownership of their lessons enough to use these words. So obviously, yes and no are going to be right at the beginning. But the sentence, I do not understand, I need my student to understand that they can tell me I do not understand, because the best way for me to know that is for them to tell me it. And so if I teach them I do not understand, then they will be able to say it back to me when it applies. Can you repeat that? Can you slow down? What is this called? And they bring you something and point at, what is this called? Those 4 sentences will help you as a teacher so much if you can convince your students to learn them and use them. I think it's just very important that your student knows that they have permission to tell you, slow down. Because one of the biggest problems we have in with our lower level students trying to understand is they don't necessarily hear where words stop and the next one starts. When I'm working with a very low level class, I will put a slight gap between words. This helps the student understand where one word stops and the next word starts. It slows me down a lot too. So their level of comprehension when I do that skyrockets. Now, I realize that is a technique that is used inside a classroom, and it's not what they're going to be facing out in the world. But that's fine. In the classroom, they will get that extra help, that extra bit of scaffolding that I can provide just by slowing down, just by putting that little gap in there to help them learn better while they're in my room. Then they will also get that permission to understand, to say, can you slow down? And they are likely to get to that point where they would ask other people out in the community to slow down if they were speaking too quickly and they were not able to understand. So I think it's very important that we teach our students how to advocate for themselves in that regard. Something else I use when I'm working with lower level students is this card system that shows me how the students are feeling during that class. They can use a little token on it to move that around. They can move the cards around. I was teaching a math class once, a GED level math class, and I had them like on a little ring system that would stand up. And I was teaching, and everybody's cards were on green. And I said something and I wrote something on the board and I turned around and they were all either red or yellow. And that instantly told me, okay, something I just said threw everybody in the room. They were not catching what it was that I said, or I just confused things. So I knew I needed to back up and then try again, take another run at that so that they could get back to that point where they were understanding. And the fact that we had been using these for a bit and the class understood how to use them, it was extremely valuable for us that everybody was like, okay, nope, missed that. Let's take another shot at it. And that was their, they knew that they were encouraged to use those. Give me a red card. I want that red card so that I know where you're feeling. And so by giving me those red cards or the yellow cards, I was able to back up, explain what they had all missed, and then get them back up to green. The nice thing about this is that traffic lights are the same universally. Green means go, red means stop, yellow means drive very fast. But the little The smiley faces, you may need to explain those a bit. Those are not necessarily universal, but luckily the colors are. I think realia is very important in class. Bringing in calendars, globes, bus maps. And whenever you bring in a map, make it the map of your city. If it's a bus map, use the bus map that your students could be using, so that it's valuable in their life. So yeah, where I am in Virginia, a New York subway map, not terribly useful because we don't have a subway. And so that's not very practical. Use the bus map that for the town that you're in. So I think that as you are pulling out realia, grab the things that that are true for their lives. Other activities could be things like pick out the words that are the same. And so in these sets, which of the words are exactly the same? Or in this one, which word is different? And so you're looking at, in that last one, list, fist, that F and the L look pretty similar. And so it's, that one can be a little tricky if they're still learning their letters. So getting them to see which ones are different, which ones are the same. Also, using pictures and their ability to show their understanding on something. They may not be able to create the phrase by bus or by car, but when they hear it and they see it, they should be able to make that connection or get to that point where they can make a connection and would be able to circle the bus for by bus or by car, and hearing the two and seeing the two, and you can use that to kind of build those skills so that they can make those connections. And in the early phases, we're really going to be looking more at identification as much as anything. Can they see? Can they find the word that is the one we're looking for? Can they find the word car? Can they find the word bus? And to the point where they could recognize it and show you which one it is. Same is true for use of cloze activities, where they would need to be able to identify what letter goes in the mix in the blank. So the M for mother or the F for father. Giving them a lot of extra support so that they could provide, so they can identify the letter that goes in. With a skill like this, I would start it off saying, he is a father. Father. Which letter goes in the blank? Father. And have them hear it several times so they don't have to create the word father. They just have to identify the fa at the beginning, and what letter would create the fa sound. And they're able to fill in the blank based off of a single letter and the word I'm saying, instead of their relying on their understanding and being able to create the word father and know the word father. As your students start getting a little bit higher, I find that frequent checks for comprehension are very important in my lessons, which is one of the things that make teaching on Zoom a challenge, because I don't have that ability to jump in and make as many comprehension checks as I would like on Zoom as I do in person. So that definitely makes it a bit harder. But asking yes/no questions with lower level students is a great way to handle some of that. Higher level students could handle a more complex question like, where is she? It does require your student to be able to have more active vocabulary. But if you ask the yes/no questions of, is she at the store? Is she at the bank? Is she at the post office? That's a better a better way to handle that, because she doesn't have to create those words. At the lowest level, your student may be able to just go with yes, she is a yes for the question about the store, no for the bank, and no for the post office. As they're getting a little higher, they may be able to go yes, she is, or no, she isn't, or yes, she is at the store. No, she is not at the bank. She is at the store. That's something that you can do to build those skills incrementally until they get to the point where the student can say, no, she is not at the post office. She's at the store. And that would be kind of the highest level of skill that we're looking for a student at that with this task. You can also pull in either ors. Is she at the bank or the pharmacy? Is he on the bus or on a plane? And so that either or, just giving them two options, will help narrow down the choices enough that they'll be able to answer a comprehension check fairly easily. Then my final activity is a picture-based experience story. What I ask the student to do is, as they are doing a task that they do all the time, take pictures of themselves doing it for every step in the process. Like as they're cooking dinner, they take pictures of their pulling the ingredients out of the fridge, chopping the vegetables, cooking the vegetables, and like each step they bring in a new picture for each of the steps. And then either the tutor or student loads them into a computer or prints them out. Then the tutor and the student will write a caption below each picture. Usually a short, simple sentence to describe exactly what's happening in those pictures. And then you can edit all that together and throw it into something like Microsoft Publisher or Canva, that you can create a little booklet, and then you print that out, and the student can take home a book that they wrote. And that is a great activity to kind of get them more excited and more engaged in what they're learning. And they have something that they can take home to be proud of. Look, I wrote a book. Okay, so any questions? I know that there were several that came through in the chat. I'm going to actually, here is my email address. You'll be able to, if you have any questions after this session, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to answer whatever I can via email. But I'm going to stop sharing and see what kind of questions we have in the chat.
Stephen, this is Karen in Florida. I just wanted to jump on and say thank you so much. I'm getting ready to head over to Morocco to teach English for a couple weeks.
Okay.
And I have a lot planned already, and this has just given me a higher confidence level. And I really appreciate all the tips and tricks that you've passed on. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Glad to help. And have fun in Morocco.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
I haven't seen too many questions in the chat yet, but feel free to
Seems to be some
unmute yourself.
technical issues at the beginning.
Yeah, apologies for that.
The joy of anything online. And then a lot of thank yous at the end. Okay, but what other questions? We've got lots of time. So is it that everybody understands everything perfectly, or is it that it just feels a little overwhelming and I don't know what my question is yet?
I'll ask a couple questions if you don't mind.
Great, absolutely.
So how long do you work with the students at a time? Do you use the typical 50-minute, 10-minute break, or do you just sense how they're feeling and how their attention span is going and go from there?
So most of my program is one-on-one tutoring. And so most of the tutoring happens in person. And what they do is they will have a 2-hour lesson. Usually it's about 50 to 55 minutes, and then a 10-minute break, and then the rest. In general, I find that when they're meeting in person, they do prefer the 1 hour twice, the 2 hours once a week. If they are meeting online, it tends to be split and 1 hour twice a week. As we are all very aware, Zoom fatigue is real. If you sit on Zoom for too long, I know my brain starts feeling mushy. And so I don't find that to be the best way for me to learn. And so by having that opportunity for a couple of sessions makes it a little bit easier. Also, one of the problems that we run into is working in multiple sessions during the week in person means finding childcare twice a week, finding parking and transportation, all of the logistical parts of that, and it's just easier to meet once a week. But I know that not every organization has the same situation we have. So,
Yeah, great tips. We're actually doing a summer camp, so we're meeting with them Monday through Thursday, all day with a lunch break. So and I'd love to hear your input on this as well. What we do to try to mix up the lessons is to have craft activities. They're preteen and teenage girls, so
okay.
building bracelets and things like that.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I honestly think you're going to get better results by doing it that way, where you have a little bit of lesson and then you do some arts and crafts, but really encouraging them to use the language during that arts and crafts. And then you go back and you have a little bit of classroom time, and then you go to lunch and you come back and and breaking it up into little chunks like that is going to make the learning more worthwhile for the student. I think you'll get better results that way.
Great. And last thing, if you wouldn't mind, could you share the slides? I'd love to share them with my other volunteers.
Yes, that's not a problem.
Thank you so much.
I'll send a PDF to Stephanie, and she'll be able to get those out to everyone who attended.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen.
And there will be a recording of the webinar as well on our YouTube, so we'll send that around afterwards. To answer a couple of questions in the chat, one was asking for recommended material. Or do you have any textbook recommendations for low-level students?
So I use the Venture series from Cambridge University Press and their basic level book, which has 2 workbooks. It has the literacy level workbook and the basic level workbook. The literacy level is for students who don't have literacy in their first language or do not have the Latin alphabet. And so it is very foundational of having the students learn how to write the letters and what is needed to get those fine motor skills for writing. But it is at a low enough level that we have been very successful with students getting through that basic level. And then once they've completed basic, moving into level 1 and being able to handle that material pretty easily.
Awesome. And I think this was a callback to the presentation. You mentioned do these 3 first: concrete nouns,
Question verbs,
question verbs, and
action verbs. Concrete nouns, action verbs, and easily identifiable adjectives. Size, color.
Heard. Yeah. Awesome. Another question about breaking down words, sounds, etc. With the last activity of making a book, could you suggest some activities? Was only thinking about making food. What about for men? Ideas, please.
Things that your student does. So I would go with like typical things that your student does. Do they work on their car? How do they, what do they do to fix their car? Mowing the lawn, or whatever activity that the student does on a regular basis. Perhaps your student, male or female, is a house painter. And so what do they do to get started? What do they do to kind of set up before they break out the paint? How do they mix the paint? And each of those steps. So regardless of what task it is, the task itself is not that important. It's just something that they need to do, that there's several steps involved, and that will work.
Awesome, thank you. Some people are also asking for the name of the book, so I might have you email me those as well so we can share those with the group, or if you can drop them in the chat.
Yeah.
You recommended. Fantastic. Are there any other questions? Venture series from Cambridge University Press. Beautiful.
If you were looking for some very foundation level readers, there's a series from Grassroots Press they're in Canada, but they have they actually have a book series that is designed basically the same way that I described the experience story, where it's like a giant picture and a short single line underneath it describing what's happening. But they're all written on adult themes, like somebody lost their car keys, and somebody had been married for many years, got divorced, and is now going on its first date after having not gone on a date in 40 years. Somebody's going to a potluck. And so it's adult themes, but the Lexile level on the lowest book is like 160. So that's like, kindergarten level reading. So it's the same idea as the C-Spot Run, where it's a very, there's a picture of an activity, simple sentence, and describing what's going on there. But that series from Grassroots Press is fantastic.
Awesome.
I am not paid to endorse either of those products.
This is not an ad. Yeah.
I should be, with the number of times I've recommended both of them, but I'm not on either of their payrolls.
Maybe soon in the future. Yeah.
Just a kickback here and there. Like that wouldn't hurt anything.
Alrighty. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you, Stephen, so much for your time, and thank you everyone for being here. I hope you found it.
Got a new question. Thoughts
Mm-hmm.
on Laubach method? So I feel like the method itself is fine. I don't have a problem with the Laubach method. I have a problem with the Laubach materials. The Laubach materials look like they were created in the 1980s, because they were. And the materials look so dated that any student who looks at it would be like, wow, you dragged this out of the cellar to use for me. What's up with that? Don't I matter more than that? I'm not like, I don't have big problems with it, but my understanding is they are either working on, or they're fully aware of how it looks. But New Readers Press, my understanding is they are going to address that and kind of update it. I don't know, just pull it up, 20 years ahead, even if you don't make it all the way to today. But yeah, the material in there is dated. And so that's a problem for me. And I have friends who work at ProLiteracy. ProLiteracy is the professional development arm, and New Readers Press is the the publishing arm of the same organization. So I have friends who work there, and I've told them this. So this isn't something that I've kept to myself. But
I'm glad we're going straight to the source and hopefully
Oh,
getting
yeah.
those changes soon. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome. Appreciate that question. I think we got a resounding no from somebody else also. That
again,
agreed.
probably I think Faye is probably also not a fan, possibly for the same reasons. It's not something I would jump in on.
Yeah, it was made for literacy, for people who speak and
Right.
understand English, and then to make it work for ESL, I did for years. And I mean, I have a ton of PowerPoints for every lesson for all the extra stuff, but anybody trying to do that in person, I pray for them and bless them, and I'm glad it's
Right.
not me.
It's again, I agree. Laubach was definitely designed if you have English as a first language. It can be used for foundation literacy for English language learners. There's just so many other materials out there that are a better choice.
Beautiful. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. Thank you again, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Take care, Stephen. Bye. Don't forget to fill out the survey also, please. Thank you.